Bueno, vamos allá, ¿no? Bueno, buenas
Adelante.
tardes. Buenas tardes. Os damos la bienvenida a este webinar en nombre de Efimatica y también en nombre de nuestro partner, Promisec. Muchas gracias por asistir. Espero que resulte interesante. Bueno, como sabéis, este mes está dedicado a nivel mundial a la ciberseguridad y en ciberseguridad suelen decirse dos ideas bastante tópicas y bastante típicas, pero no por ello menos ciertas. Una es en medio en broma, pero es cierto que hay dos tipos de empresas, las que han sufrido ataques y las que los sufrirán. Y otro es un mensaje más importante, que es que lo más efectivo que podemos hacer siempre en la lucha contra los ciberataques es la concienciación de las personas, y para eso webinars como este. Podemos tomar muchas medidas técnicas y tecnológicas para prevenir o subsanar ataques, pero es imposible conseguir un riesgo cero, y entonces es cuando el eslabón más débil, que siempre somos las personas, es el que sufre. Bueno, yendo al tema, esta sesión va a ser de unos 50 minutos. Vamos a ver la agenda, por favor, Carlas.
Sí.
Primero vamos a ver nuestra visión sobre los retos que ha supuesto y que suponen las amenazas agravadas por el tema del teletrabajo en todas las empresas que lo estamos practicando. Y después veremos una pincelada de la solución que propone nuestro partner Promisec y una demo de la misma. Esta parte hemos tenido un problema con Nesher, que es el técnico que la da, y en lugar de hacerla en vivo la vamos a hacer pasar grabada, pero es la misma sesión que íbamos a hacer, pero ya la teníamos grabada de una sesión anterior. ¿Vale? Al final tendremos unos minutos para preguntas, dudas, comentarios, que además podéis ir poniendo durante la sesión en el chat. Y si queda alguna cosa por responder, pues ya lo haríamos después por email. A ver, sin más, pues ya paso la palabra a Carlas. Y una vez más, os agradezco la asistencia y hablamos al final.
Perfecto, muchas gracias, Eloy. Muchas gracias a todos y a todas por asistir a este webinar. Mi intervención será muy breve, afortunadamente para vosotros. Simplemente pues quiero mostraros la relación existente entre teletrabajo y ciberseguridad. Hoy ciberseguridad sería más aplicable, ¿no? Únicamente será a modo introductorio del contenido principal de este webinar, pues que vendrá de la mano de Promisec. Para quien no me conozca, soy Carla Serra, soy asesor corporativo para empresas en seguridad de la información, tanto en la parte de ciberseguridad como seguridad normativa. Divulgo contenidos, noticias, artículos, publicaciones varias, informes a través de la plataforma o proyecto Zero Risk, y actualmente soy el responsable del área comercial de la parte de ciberseguridad de Efimatica. Efimatica es una tecnológica ubicada en Girona, que lleva pues prácticamente 2 décadas ofreciendo servicios en torno a las TIC, servicios y soluciones a medida para todo tipo de empresas, pequeñas, medianas y grandes, y bastante transversal a nivel de sectores. Sí que es cierto que quizá podríamos identificar su expertise en proyectos web o e-commerce, en cuestión de infraestructura, servicios wifi, de todo tipo de comunicaciones, por supuesto también en el área de ciberseguridad, ¿no? Que lo que nos ocupa hoy. Bien, hecha la presentación, entremos en materia. ¿Qué consecuencias nos ha traído la pandemia? Y sé que es un tema pues, del cual se ha hablado mucho, pero los números, las estadísticas nos impulsan a seguir percutiendo en esta idea, ¿no? Porque vemos que la realidad de estos últimos 20 meses no ha cambiado demasiado. A nivel de consecuencias, pues destacaría 2. La primera, el gran incremento de ciberataques a escala mundial, global, ¿no? en gran parte, en gran medida, provocado por el incremento brutal de phishing, un 700% aproximadamente comparado con el periodo anterior, lo cual ha implicado, obviamente, pues, más riesgo para comprometer las infraestructuras de las empresas. Además de haber habido un incremento tan fuerte, la cuestión es que han sido más exitosos que tiempo atrás. En primer lugar, porque los ataques son más sofisticados, son más inteligentes, están bien más hechos, vamos. Y por otra parte, por la debilidad, por la inseguridad de los puntos, es decir, del teletrabajo, del endpoint, dijéramos, fuera del perímetro tradicional en donde se movía con cierta seguridad. Por otra parte, otra consecuencia que nos deja la pandemia es el teletrabajo, obviamente, ¿no? Aquello que debía ser algo temporal, pues se ha ido debatiendo en estos últimos meses, y por parte de las direcciones de las empresas como por parte de los trabajadores parece ser que se ha llegado a un consenso en la afirmación de que esta fórmula puede favorecer lo que es tanto la eficacia como la eficiencia del propio trabajo, ¿no? Y de este modo, pues llegamos a día de hoy con unas estadísticas pues, bastante significativas, ¿no? En tanto que 9 de cada 10 trabajadores esperan trabajar cuanto menos un día a la semana desde casa, y 9 de cada 10 empresas parecen estar por la labor de facilitar este hecho, ¿no? Sin duda, nos encaminamos con paso firme hacia un entorno híbrido, en mayor o menor medida, pero que va a ser incorporado en todas las empresas, eso podéis estar seguro. ¿Qué tenemos frente a eso? Pues bueno, la demostración palpable de que el teletrabajo es un riesgo evidenciado. 1 de cada 5 empresas han sido ciberatacadas teniendo como responsable un puesto remoto. Estos son estadísticas y no es falso alarmismo, os lo prometo. A nivel nacional, pues bien, en este caso no aplica el dicho de Spain is different, no, ni mucho menos. Únicamente tenemos que googlear los conceptos teletrabajo y ciberataque y veremos que nos arroja cientos o miles de resultados, pero no en reducidos temporalmente aquel inicio, ¿no? No, hemos visto que la progresión de este riesgo, ya no únicamente artículos o publicaciones de opinión, sino basados en informes, nos demuestran que estamos lejos de conseguir que este binomio de teletrabajo y ciberseguridad anden de la mano. Concretamente, el año pasado, 218.000 ciberataques fueron registrados por el CCN y casi 1.500 brechas de seguridad notificadas a la Agencia Española de Protección de Datos. Bien, aquí veis una serie de empresas que os sonarán todas, obviamente, que han sido ciberatacadas este último año. No están todas, pero probablemente sean las más mediáticas, las más populares, las que aparecen siempre en los medios. Lo preocupante puede ser el llegar a pensar cuántos cientos o miles de casos se esconden detrás, es decir, cuánto grande es el iceberg que no vemos porque mediáticamente o a nivel popular pues, bien, pues no se manifiesta, o bien porque no lo comunican, que también es otro motivo, ¿no? ¿Y cómo llegamos a este punto? Mediados de marzo del año 2020, el gobierno decreta el estado de alarma y de un día para otro tenemos que irnos a casa a trabajar porque el gobierno nos lo exige por compromiso social e, insisto, en 24 horas tenemos que tener habilitado nuestro puesto de trabajo en casa. Bien, las empresas no tienen capacidad de reacción, es imposible hacerlo esto debidamente en 24 horas. Y se hace, pues como se puede, sinceramente, dando prioridad a la disponibilidad del dato y dejando su integridad y privacidad pues para más adelante, ¿no? No existe en ninguna compañía una buena cultura de ciberseguridad, no hay protocolos, procedimientos, políticas, no hay plan de contingencia que albergara pues un descalabro de esta magnitud, ¿no? Por otra parte, faltan medios económicos para dotar a los trabajadores de equipos bien configurados. Tampoco había tiempo. Si los equipos de IT de las empresas ya van a tope siempre, imaginaros una situación. Seguro que lo habéis vivido, ¿no? Por otra parte, destaca de una manera sorprendente, incluso yo diría, la gran agilidad por parte de la ciberdelincuencia a adaptarse a este nuevo medio. Justamente en marzo del 2020 se desatan 19 millones de ataques a escritorios remotos. Crecen de una manera muy significativa los registros de dominio para uso fraudulento, aquellos que únicamente tienen una vida de 24 horas. Y, por supuesto, que aumentan los casos de phishing, como antes comentaba, con temáticas a la cual la población es muy sensible, ¿no? Comunicaciones de la propia enfermedad, el coronavirus, comunicaciones gubernamentales por parte de estamentos oficiales, o bien incluso haciéndose pasar por recursos humanos de tu propia empresa para saber qué hacer al día siguiente, ¿no? Bien, esto trae como consecuencia pues un poco de descontrol. Se difumina el perímetro existente y nos encontramos en una situación en la cual los distintos endpoints, usuarios, trabajadores activos, en definitiva, de la empresa, se esparcen y no tenemos control sobre ellos. Usamos conexiones inseguras la mayor de las veces, usando una VPN provisional. Seguimos usando autentificación débil a través de usuario y contraseña, un método pues que, bueno, ya hemos visto que no es el mejor de todos, ¿no? Y sobre todo usamos dispositivos personales. Las empresas ya les parece normal el que puedan utilizar los trabajadores portátil o bien el smartphone de su familia para trabajar, que es lo importante, ¿no? Trabajar. Bien, ¿qué ocurre? Pues que al usar ese tipo de dispositivos en los cuales pues, no tenemos visibilidad de aquello que ocurre, no sabemos si en él corre un antivirus, no sabemos qué salida tiene a Internet, no sabemos qué software corre en él, cómo actualiza las vulnerabilidades, cómo parchea. Bueno, en definitiva, no tenemos visibilidad, no tenemos monitorización de aquello que está pasando. ¿Y qué ocurre en ese caso cuando no sabemos qué pasa en un equipo? Pues bien, que puede ser objeto de un ciberataque sin el usuario saberlo, porque no tiene conocimientos, y a partir de ahí existe el robo de credenciales y más tarde pues existe el acceso lícito por parte del ciberdelincuente con las credenciales del usuario a cualquier recurso que la empresa tenga, ya sean en Promise o ya sea en Cloud, es decir, cualquier tipo de acceso. Ya, pero claro, nosotros utilizamos Office 365 para el correo, el RP pues es a través de un portal porque es software as a service que utilizamos. Bien, insisto, el ciberdelincuente ya ha robado las credenciales, ya quien se autentica es él, no el usuario legítimo, con lo cual de aquí proviene el problema, ¿no? Es una situación que en estos 20 últimos meses deberíamos haber mejorado e insisto que las estadísticas nos aseguran de que no es así. Por lo tanto, si tenemos que encaminarnos con pie firme hacia un mundo híbrido, estas consideraciones las tenemos que solventar. Es por ello que animo a todas las empresas a que sean proactivas en este punto, que también la compliance nos obliga a ello, y pongamos los recursos para tener un control más exhaustivo de nuestros activos. De acuerdo, pues yo hasta aquí mi parte, ya os dije que sería corta, os agradezco vuestra atención y en este momento doy paso a Promisec, quien os ofrecerá una explicación un poco más detallada de lo que acabo de introducir y a partir de aquí ojalá os pueda ser de interés. Muchas gracias, Promisec. When you want to start.
That's fantastic. It was very illuminating. Okay, so as we said, we have the two next sections that we'd like to tackle quickly, each both in brief. First, we'll just go over some basic cybersecurity stuff, a lot of which you'll be aware of and a lot of which might fill in some holes. And this is sort of information which, if you follow best practices, it's according to the, the Pareto principle, the 80-20 law. If you do these pretty basic things, and if you're aware of these basic principles, you can often make great strides. And the basis of what we're saying here is really one very basic idea, which is that threat agents look for the easiest way to get in. How do they often get in? It's what's known, the term is social engineering sometimes, and sometimes it could just be to use taking advantage of the human element, right? And that means that if we know more information, if our users know more information, our employees, as the case may be, know more information, are aware of what a cyber attack might look like and how we defend against them and what the correct actions are, then just that one step can often be a huge step forward. And in fact, much more effective many times than just being able to, purchase some expensive cybersecurity solution. Now, why is this extremely relevant now? During the work from home, let's say, paradigm, we rely on our employees a lot more. In a sense, a lot of them are, working remotely. They've got their own setups going. They've got their own, there's sometimes, their own IT managers. They've got to do a lot of things on their own. And just, boosting that, the resiliency of the human element can make a huge difference, right? So first of all, one of the most important things to understand is that cyber attacks don't necessarily just target computers. They're usually what we're talking about. We're usually mentioning computers, but that's not a matter of necessity. It can be anything with a chip. It can be, computers, ATMs, it could be phones. And all of those have their own attack vectors and their own defense vectors. And that's one of those an important piece of information to bear in mind, because it also means that it stretches across many industries. Now, what I've laid out here, obviously, we're not going to go through and read through it one by one, but this is the sort of general awareness do's and don'ts, where none of these are difficult to implement, and also none of them seem like some complex strategy which would be difficult to understand or to explain to your employees. It's all about just general awareness, realizing if you've got to report some application on your computer, some antivirus software says something's wrong, mention it, raise a flag, look into things a little bit, be a little bit skeptical where possible. Often many of the big vendors, Google, Microsoft, companies of that ilk will provide very easy access to security measures, which require a little bit of a step. For example, multi-factor authentication. I'm sure you're all familiar, which is another additional vector in addition to a password. Enabling that is often the click of a button and can make you much more resilient. Now, it seems often that these simple techniques, the simple things of just not connecting to a unsecured Wi-Fi or double checking on something that seems a little bit suspicious, it's not the most advanced technique, but often these can be the most basic and the most intrinsically important measures that we can take, right? So that's, that goes for the use of USBs, of unsecured networks. It goes for the use of whenever you're accessing something which is confidential or which requires any other level of, restriction, use a VPN wherever possible. Backups are a big part of cybersecurity. As a cybersecurity professional, I can tell you that backups are golden ticket out of many situations. Something like ransomware. If you lose information, if you've been successfully compromised, if you have a backup, a lot of the times that's your disaster recovery. That's how you walk that back. Let's talk for a second about passwords. So as you all know, passwords are ubiquitous. We use them for many different use cases, and often they're the central barrier to somebody who's up to no good, who's trying to gain access to your assets on some service or some tool. It'll be a password. So make sure your passwords are strong, make sure they're unique, make sure that they are exclusive only to you, and that the storage of them is secure. For example, it's not good practice to just save all your passwords in your Chrome browser, because that puts them to a certain degree at risk if your browser is compromised. Don't share them, obviously. It's also encouraged to change them, because if somebody does happen to get your access to your password and breaks in, if you change your password, you've effectively booted them back out. So making sure that you have a good password both on the level of, just educating your employees, educating people what a good password is, and also on the level of, implementing a password policy, whether it be, Office 365 or whichever SaaS you're using, or, just throughout your company. Good, unique, strong passwords can make a huge difference, just organization-wide. And again, they're easy to connect to implement. Okay, so cybersecurity events, again, obviously I won't read through all of these. There's a lot of different signs which you should know to look for, which can indicate that something is wrong. Unless there's something like a ransomware attack wherein they obviously want you to know, the attacker wants you to know because there's an action item which they have for you. Generally, it'll just be strange behavior. And as people, we're trying to get through our day, we might not stop and say, wait a second, that's not just strange, but maybe they're strange and I should take care of it, right? So obviously what I should be doing, if I notice that something is strange, if there's settings that have been changed, if I'm being redirected, if something seems to be very slow, or I see that information that should not be out there is out there, it's easy to just move on, but the smart thing to do is say, wait a second, something's not right, and know to escalate. So if we teach our employees, if we teach our users to be a little bit on top of things and to employ a little bit of critical thinking, and if something seems wrong, escalate it to the IT team or the cyber team, or raise the flag to their manager. A lot of times, the distance in attacks between initial penetration and where the attacker wants to be at the level of impact is quite a great distance, and they might be months within the network. And the first person to notice that something is a little bit off and enable us to begin, incident response, and many times mitigate nearly all of the damage that might be done by a successful cyber attack. Okay, so just to give us a second, we'll zoom out a second. This is generally the basic stages. I mentioned this a second ago of how a cyber attack looks, right? First you look out, you say you've identified some target, assuming this is a threat actor who's targeting you specifically. You do some reconnaissance, you say, what am I looking for? How am I going to get in? Initial access, you gain your first things. This will be, one email password. It'll be just, a guest access Wi-Fi. It could be any small thing. And then from there, what you want to be doing, or they want to be doing, is to escalate their privileges and move through the organization, because in the end, they have some kind of agenda. It'll be, exfiltration of information. It'll be to break something. It'll be to steal something, or, deploy malware, ransomware, whatever they would like. Before you get to this level, correct cyber hygiene, which is to say good practices, can make a huge, very significant difference. And you can often identify the issue before the level of the impact and before any real damage has been done. But what does this require? Again, calling back to what we were speaking about before, this requires the human element to be employed, just general awareness of what it looks like, what attacks look like, how it works can be extremely useful. So why are threat actors carrying out these cyber attacks? On the one hand, you could say, I don't really care. I don't want them to. But understanding our enemy, right? Understanding the person on the other side, enables us to understand what they're going to be going for, what we should be protecting against, right? And in the end, that informs our defense strategy. So the motives are obviously many, but many of them break down into the following four, which is espionage, which is some kind of information. They want to attack us. They want to create some kind of direct harm. They want to influence us. This will often be, this might be a geopolitical, on the geopolitical stage. This can be customer swaying, can be something like that, or it can be financial gain. And I'll say that often in the past years, more and more attacks have been just focusing in on financial gain, which is, often achieved by ransomware or by installing something which will have your computer mined for Bitcoin or something like that. So these are the kind of the reasons why cyber attackers will be carrying out their attacks. One of the most known vectors, 60%-ish of attacks begin with phishing, which is to say their first access is initiated by somebody sending an email, classically. And if you follow the action items set out in that email, you can expose yourself, right? Your users can expose themselves. So there's some easy ways where they can notice, wait a second, something's wrong. This could be from the domain. In general, your critical thinking red lights should always jump up. or I'll always turn on if there's some kind of call to action which says you need to do this right now. If it's not personalized, again, this is many times it's a shotgun approach. You want to be aware of that and say if somebody's speaking to me, they'll know my name, they'll be relevant. The claim will often sound suspicious. If you say, "Hi, it's the CEO, and I'm in Brazil, and I got stuck, and I need help, and you need to wire me such and such to here," that's not a normal thing to notice, right? So somebody who's aware of the option of phishing and knows knows what it looks like will see something like this and say, "Oh, obviously this is a misnomer. Somebody is trying to misdirect me here." Also, links. Often the action items, they're trying to send you to somewhere where they will download viruses or malware to your device, or they're trying to get you to enter information which you don't want to be entering. It'll expose you in some way. So there will be a link, and the link can say anything in the format of the web page. But if you hover over it, you can see the link sends to some, it'll say, "Oh, this is to Amazon," and it won't be to Amazon, it'll be somewhere else. So hovering over the link is also another tool you can quickly use. CEO fraud, another example of common attack, since the CEO often holds the keys, they'll be the ones who will be targeted the most. Ransomware, more and more different types of ransomware are becoming prevalent, and being aware of them can often help me to understand A, the dangers, and B, what I can do to sort of mitigate the dangers. How it usually works is through a vector such as phishing or something like that. Malware, which consists of ransomware, makes it onto your network. They attempt to distribute themselves as widely as possible and as highly as possible throughout the organization. Then the moment of impact comes, they've said we've disseminated far enough within the network. Then suddenly files are encrypted, and then they'll send you an email. The message will pop up and will say something like, your files have been encrypted. If you would like to decrypt them, then send us such and such money, such Bitcoin to such and such an address. If not, within 24 hours, it's all very urgent. They threaten oftentimes if you try to decrypt this or contact any agencies, then money will double or you'll lose your information. And many times this is the doomsday scenario for a lot of organizations, depending on the impact. And you don't want to reach this situation. There's a lot of different ways it can play out. Sometimes it can be decrypted, sometimes it can't, sometimes people choose to pay. And again, by the way, calling back to what we said a little while ago, one of the most basic things and one of the most important things you can do is, again, backups here. Because if I've had some doomsday ransomware event, but I have really good backups, which are offline, and they're not connected to my usual information, and they did not get encrypted, oftentimes I'll say, oh, well, I guess I'll lose a couple of hours reconstituting my entire network. And in the end, it's not a big deal. So, backups are often a good solution. But we don't want to get here. We don't want to get to the level of ransomware. So employing good cyber hygiene and being aware can be of critical importance. These are the types of malicious actors. What we're really scared of on higher level organizations where you've employed basic cybersecurity tools, I need somebody with staying power and with technological know-how to be able to penetrate my defenses, assuming we're talking about organizations which have their stuff together. Again, this is not necessarily directly relevant, but it's good to know just to get a better picture of how the cyber landscape looks like. Who are the actors? How does this work? Some recent attacks, I'm sure you're aware of some. We could put 20 more well-known ones here. The real takeaway of this slide is not necessarily the specific stories. It's that everyone is a target in an age where cyber attacks can be automated. An attack where there's a very shotgun approach. It's very much a shotgun approach. Everyone can expect to have some level of pinging off their defenses, and the way you won't be victim in the end to some malicious actor will be just before purchasing any really expensive, really difficult, complex, difficult to implement cybersecurity solutions. The first step to do is just general knowledge, guidance, and awareness. Let your employees know what to look for, how it looks, what the cyber landscape looks like, what they're supposed to do, which is obviously identify, escalate, enable remediation, and you'll be doing yourself a big favor by doing a relatively small step, a relatively easy to gain step, just to improve that critical human element, and ultimately really upgrade the resiliency of your organization. Okay, so that was the first section of what I wanted to talk about. I'll jump over here to what we're looking at here is actually Promisec's dashboard. Just make sure we're still up. Yeah, we're still good. So what we're looking at here is actually an answer to one of the difficulties which we're encountering specifically in this new paradigm of work from home, right? So we'll start at the beginning. One of the difficulties of managing a network with many, many computers is, in this test case scenario, we're looking at just 54 endpoints. And the difficulty is that if we define a policy, which is how we manage network, I define a policy of what constitutes a protected endpoint, and then I say, tell me about any deviation from that policy, right? The problem is, this is an inherent paradigmal problem, is that there will be a lot. These computers are complex and they've got a lot of issues of different kinds. There'll be antivirus issues, or application issues, or configuration issues, or updates. There's many different kinds of issues that we can have, and very quickly, you find yourself swimming in a sea of things that, if you fixed all of them, yes, your network would be extensively protected. But how do you fix all of them? How do you prioritize them? How do you identify them? How do I know where they are to get myself, some kind of picture of where I stand, right? So the Promisec dashboard, PEM, as we call it, the Promisec Endpoint Manager, enables users, both from C-level executive kind of level who need a real overview of the network, all the way down to the specific IT worker who will be remediating the issues, or a cyber team worker, or a SOC member, or anybody else who is working with the security of the network, enables them to get very quickly a real picture of what's wrong, where it's wrong, and what the first things I need to do are. So I'll quickly demonstrate. We don't have too much time to get very into the weeds, but obviously we're happy to follow up if anybody would like to afterwards with time. So what our solution to the problem is basically predicated on answering each of those questions, right? So we've said the first thing is, I need to know what is wrong. So here on this small test network, the issues of what have been identified have been broken down by categories. And obviously these charts will change depending on which identified issues I have. And oftentimes there's a pretty staggering statistic which came out in a recent checkpoint report, which is that many cyber attacks, to the tune of 60% of cyber attacks which are successfully perpetrated, could have been mitigated if only patches were applied. That's to say, the attacks that were used had defenses already created and already deployed by Microsoft or whichever security company. The only thing missing was for the people to actually apply those patches and keep their computers updated. So one of the main types of vulnerabilities that we see, which are again very easily remediated, or at least on a one-to-one level, are missing updates, hot fixes, patches. The more I'm up to date, the more I'm defended, right? So what we're looking at here in this middle component, if on the left we've answered what the problem is, here we start to dive into where the problem is. Now I've got up at the top, what we've identified as the 4 main types of issue which I want to be aware of right away, and that's missing OS updates. That's applications which shouldn't be, whether you'll have a configured blacklist or a configured whitelist of applications which are approved. And here I can see that within the network of 54 endpoints, I've got 38% with unapproved applications, 25% antivirus issue. Again, this is very, very common, which is to say, I'm a user, I've got a network, and on my network, I know that I'm protected by some trusted vendor of an antivirus. But do I have anything which is ensuring that the antivirus is actually deployed? Do I have anything that's showing that the antivirus is up to date or that it's enabled on the computer? A lot of times that's something that's very hard to keep track of. And despite purchasing some cybersecurity antivirus or EDR solution, I don't actually know whether I'm protected. So this is one of the deviations from policy which we identify as being problematic. And here we can see that 25% of the endpoints in the network are actually problematic with antivirus issues of some type or another. Active CVEs, which is an active weakness which is matched to something which is known, is not currently extant in the network. Again, would show if there were computers which were identified as having active CVE. So what do I see down here below? Again, if we return to the paradigm of attempting to solve all the problems in a network, we quickly see that it becomes a lot. So in order to allow us to really find where the problems are and to start to go in and fix them, I can create any kind of division I want within this dashboard. So here we've divided it by VLANs, which is, a logical deviation definition. You could also do by OS name, which is just the build of endpoints which we're looking at. And we can also use this to filter down our results. So first of all, I'll say that you can create a group from whichever type of endpoints you like. This is, a list of all the endpoints that you have in the organization, and you can create your own groups. This allows you to actually, cut down your organization into different parts according to whatever you like. It can be, logical, it can be VLANs, it can be company, it can be networks, it can be geographical, however you like. You can identify your the groups in your organization. And once you've done that, you can look at them and either see the overall status in just one of the groups. I could say the Windows 7 Enterprise in my organization, there's 2 of those. They no active CVEs, but I can see that they both have antivirus issues, they both have unapproved applications, and they both have OS updates. I can also, I can add this, I have a filter here at the top where I can always slap on another line and sort of cut down what I'm looking through. And in that way, I can always be focusing in on where the issues are. Obviously, it takes a second to reconstitute because we're going back to the whole database and refreshing the data that's there. And now what we've done by adding that line, right? We added the OS name to the filter. We're now looking at only those two endpoints. And within those 2 endpoints, these are the issues that remain. And right away, we've already cut it down to far less issues than we had before. But let's say I want to, look at it a different way. Let's just add a different type of rule. Let's say, what if I only want to concern myself, first of all, with things that I should be prioritizing? So I'm going to say, let's filter issue severity by high, and then remove the grouping 1. And again, it'll reconstitute again from the database. And now we can see that we're down to a much more manageable 373 issues. Okay, so we've sort of blazed through this a little bit quickly. So I'll take a step back and I'll explain again, just run over what the applications, the use cases of this dashboard are. Obviously, there's a lot of sections and tools which I won't get into from here. But what this enables me to do is to say, this is what I consider to be okay on an endpoint. I define a policy, and then I monitor for deviations from policy. A deviation from policy shows up as an issue, and I can then very quickly filter through those issues, identify critical ones, and ultimately be able to remediate them very quickly. One last thing before we wrap up to the Q&A. Again, we're talking about work from home. How is this so specifically relevant to the work from home paradigm? PEM allows us, beyond just looking at the endpoints on the network, it allows us to disseminate agents to a remote endpoint. It could be anywhere in the world. And they are effectively agents which communicate with my on-premise database, with my on-premise management server for the PEM dashboard. And then those endpoints become folded into the rest of my network, and I can consider them as computers on my network. Why is this critical? Because often a computer that's not in my network, I can't defend. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how are the passwords, whether they have an antivirus, whether there's CVEs, whether there's something on that. I don't have control, and yet the assets of my organization are exposed. So this work from home section of PEM enables me to just solve that problem, because I'll put an agent on the computer, and then effectively the PEM dashboard will take them in and consider them as part of the network, as physically present on my network. And I can monitor them and identify problems and fix them just as if they were part of my network. And it effectively solves the danger which arises from the whole work from home paradigm. Okay, so I know we ran through that a little bit quickly because I wanted to just cover the ground that we needed to. I think that wraps it up just for the initial dashboard presentation. So I'd like to open it up, if anybody would like, to the Q&A portion. If anybody's got any questions, whether on Mangesh's section, I'm sure you'd be happy to answer, as well as the additional sections which I just spoke about, which are, general cybersecurity awareness, and secondly, specifically the PEM product. Happy to hear any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mesher. I think so. We will have a question from the audience.
Okay, so I see somebody has asked, that's a good technical question. Somebody, do we do something related to CIS? And the answer is yes. For those who are unfamiliar, CIS is a network, it's a security standard. And the answer is yes. I didn't get into it too much in the dashboard, but the way PEM works is when we say define a policy as to what is acceptable on my network, we begin with an accepted cybersecurity standard. You can obviously configure anything to be your policy, but you can also choose one of the mainstream security standards as the beginning point and just say, yes, the policy for what is acceptable on my endpoint, configure that to be according to what CIS requires, or NIST, or some other cybersecurity accepted standard. So yes, you can create your policies based on those and just with a click. Somebody asked, how can we check if there's freeware software downloaded in an organization? That's a great question. So there's two ways to do that. First, if I configure something as a blacklist application, I'll have to remove the high because it's generally not a high severity issue, right? If I identify an application as problematic and I put it in my policy as a blacklist exception, it'll be identified as an issue on every computer within my network. So it'll be here, right up top on approved applications. I can see it right over here. I could say, so, some software application which you've identified, it appears on 13 endpoints with such and such a severity score determined by its CVE score. And I can quickly open up a list of those endpoints and be aware of it there. A more in-depth answer, we have an inventory module, which I don't think we should get into now because it's another section of our dashboard of the PEM tool, where you can really drill down on every level of inventory, software and hardware within your network, and you can just say, show me all of the instances of this. So yes, you can drill down to problematic issues in several different ways and very easily. Can anything be remediated on work from home users? Okay, so this is a tricky question because in general, one of the problems with cybersecurity automation, which is essentially what you would need here, is that you run the risk of false positives. And remediation on work from home users can be tricky. We do have remediation which you could set up either semi-automated, and often the remediation which will be required will be to run a patch or run an update, and that's relatively painless and pretty much a-okay to do. And in general, yes, whatever is able to be done on computers through PEM on my network, I can do through the work from home agents. Somebody asked, can we deploy patches through Promisec? I'm not sure if I completely understood the question. My understanding of the question is, can we use the PEM tool to update computers? The answer is you can. Again, it's something which you need to set up to be either semi-automatic, and sometimes it's something which users prefer not to do because their preference will be to say, first of all, give me the list of issues, give me the places where I want to update, and then I'll use some other system which is already in place to run updates. It's possible. You can use PEM to update endpoints, certainly. Yeah.
Correct.
You have another question from Mukul.
Right, I see. All right, we're just trying to narrow it down to the specific questions which I think will be specifically beneficial. Mukul asks, can we monitor services as agents like SCCM or other solutions? I'm not sure I quite understood the question. Can we monitor services like SCCM? Mangesh, did you, Chaim or Mangesh, did you understand the question perhaps better than I did?
What is saying, like, can we monitor services is agent like SCCM or other solutions? So for example, he is saying that can we work in the fashion the SCCM works?
Oh, in the sense, okay, so I understand this one of two different ways. If the question is what Mangesh said, can we work like SCM? Then yes, we have an agent and we can monitor them and we can configure them through just in a similar fashion. What I thought you might have been asking, which is again an interesting point to address, one of the things that PEM does is it allows us to monitor the usage of our different cybersecurity solutions. PEM is not an EDR. It's not an antivirus, and it's not a host of other security solutions. It's not DLP, for example.
Right.
But what it does allow us to do is to act as a sort of watchdog for every other type of solution that I've implemented. And it might be an agent, and it might be a service, it might be an application, and to say what I have where is it enabled, and let me put a finger on the pulse of how my actual cybersecurity solutions are functioning. And it'll add another layer, a layer of security for beyond, just purchasing a solution. I can now ensure that the solution is deployed, and I can ensure that it's implemented and working. Right? It'll allow me to see that.
Yeah, there is a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mangesh.
In the chat box, there is one question. Can we get to know which all administrators are there on all systems?
Can we get to know which administrators? I'm not sure I understand.
So can we get to know which all administrators are there on all systems? For example, on the endpoints which are working from home, how many administrator logins are already present?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Can we monitor? Can we monitor the users? Yeah. That's a little bit complex. I think that's getting a little into the weeds. I think we should let's the more technical stuff, let's put that a little bit to the side. Happy to answer, I think, follow-up questions because I think we do need to wrap up. Let's answer one or two more from the ones that we have here. Abhilash asks, is it on cloud or do we have to install it internally? Oh, so actually, one of the advantages of Promisec, of the Promisec Endpoint Manager, is that it's possible to do it entirely on-premise, which is to say, in a very hands-off fashion. We'll do some setup. We'll say we need a server for the database and a server for the management. We'll show up. We install it as it needs to be. We'll set it up with you. It takes hours. It's very, very quick to do because we're not deploying for 99% of the endpoints. You don't have to put anything on the endpoint. It's not a matter of weeks or months. It's rather hours. And then you set it up. It's on-premise. And we're hands-off. This is, in a sense, much more cyber secure than other solutions, because your data, your secure data of specifically the packages of what identified vulnerabilities have been there are not being just disseminated through to a different company, but rather they remain internal. With that, it's also important to note we're talking about the work from home agent as well. The work from home agent is deployed in a very secure fashion, and it communicates securely with the server, which is on-premise, and it does not go through the company. It doesn't go through any other third parties. It doesn't, go to us and then back. So it's deployed in a secure manner, which remains within the hands of the user. Bardi asks, what antivirus solution does Promisec support monitor? A host. I don't know to say every single one specifically, but essentially any mainstream one should be covered within Promisec. We stay on top of the known solutions, and it'll be able to say any trusted vendor which has a normal amount of market share will be able to be monitored within PEM. I think we should wrap that up for a little while.
Hola. Hola, bueno, dejemos aquí. ¿Me oís? ¿Sí? Perfecto. Nada, ya os ha comentado Eloy que esta parte lamentablemente pues ha tenido que ser grabada y es la que os hemos mostrado. En cualquier caso, nos brindamos a poder contestar cualquier duda que os haya surgido al respecto. O ahora, pero como veo que a nivel del chat interno no hay preguntas, si queréis me las podéis o nos las podéis trasladar y a través de correo electrónico o cualquier otro método os las podemos hacer llegar. En cualquier caso, lo que nos quiero hacer un breve resumen en cuanto a lo que Promisec nos propone es no únicamente una herramienta de gestión de vulnerabilidades, que lo es, sino una solución para que podamos incorporar todos nuestros activos, dijéramos, dotarlos de visibilidad, ya sea a través de su pertenencia a dominio o bien a través de instalación de agentes en puestos remotos. Y esto es lo interesante, ¿no? Que con un simple dashboard o cuadro de mando podemos ver, podemos visualizar, podemos tener el control realmente de aquello que sucede en nuestras máquinas. Y esto es lo que verdaderamente creo que tiene bastante impacto a nivel de ciberseguridad. Si os parece bien, aquí lo dejamos, ya pasa el tiempo establecido, con lo cual, nada, de nuevo, pues quiero agradeceros vuestra asistencia y bien, para cualquier cuestión, insisto, podéis hacérnosla llegar y muy gustosamente os daremos respuesta. Muchísimas gracias a todos y a todas.